Hello everyone. About 2 weeks ago, I told you I was going to be doing a Q&A video and I asked you to give me some of your questions. Well, you gave me the questions and now here, in no particular order, are the answers. Plain Geek asks, what is your favourite car? Well, I really love driving the Evora 400 at the moment. If I had unlimited money to buy anything that I wanted, practicality, no consideration, I really do love the Pagani Zonda. Certainly the later ones. The shape of the early ones I don't think is dated brilliantly, but the later ones look and sound sensational. However, the favourite car that I've ever owned, or certainly the car that has a special place in my heart, is my BMW E46 330 Ci Club Sport. That was in Estoril Blue. I had that car, it was my second car, what I consider my first sort of proper car. And that car went with me all over the place. I went to so many different countries with that. I did about 40,000 miles in less than 2 years and I loved it. It was a very reliable companion, comfortable, quick enough, certainly for me at 21. It was a fast car and yeah, I do miss that car. Lee Ward asks, what is your favourite retro Ford? I'd love to own a Sierra RS500. To be honest with you, Lee, I'm not really a big Ford fan, either new or old. I'm lucky enough to have been a passenger in a genuine GT40 a very long time ago, and that was quite an experience. And my dad's really the Ford guy, and he has a real love of Capris. When I was younger, I never sort of understood it, but I do kind of like them a little bit now. And if I'm lucky, maybe I'll be able to feature the Capri in a driving capacity on the channel at some point in the near future, although it's unlikely over winter with salt going on the roads in the UK. Adam Graham asks, what Lotus do you believe will increase in value over time? Well, I think there's always going to be a demand for the Esprit and other classic Lotus like that, particularly the Type 14 Elite and indeed the Elite, the Eclat and the XL. The later ones, I think, are very underappreciated cars, and we've seen a small rise in the price of those, but I hope that continues to go up. Definitely the Lotus to look at the moment seems to be the Series 1 Elise, and of course the Exige, and those prices are certainly holding firm and also on the rise. Really though, I think a cult car from Lotus has got to be the Series 1 Evora. I've been looking at those for about 4 or 5 years, and in that time the prices have refused to go down, and I think recently prices might have actually started to go back up. So given the fact that they are actually a very rare car, even by Lotus standards, that's certainly one to keep an eye on. They're not a classic car, and they certainly won't be for a long time, but as a car to buy that you can enjoy and is also a safe place to have money, not a bad thing to consider. Chris Smith says, if you could only own one car, what would it be? Well, Chris, I'd probably have to give you a fairly boring answer. The truth is, I actually really like estate cars. And there have been a few estate cars, not necessarily recently, but in the recent past, that have combined practicality with sportiness. You had the BMW M5 Touring with that incredible V10 engine, and Audi are constantly producing fast versions of their estate cars, and so are Mercedes. In fact, I really like the look of some of the bigger Mercedes C and E-Class estates, and the Audi A6 and S6 have always been interesting cars. I think I'd definitely drive one of those if I was in the market to, say, sell the Evora and get one simple, practical, do-everything car. I really like the Volvo V90 that we tested on the channel, but as a performance car, it wasn't really that great. 177 SC Maro says, will the new Star Wars movie be another remake? Probably yes. Disney are very risk averse, and I don't think they've spent much time writing these films, so I suspect they're just going for the lowest common denominator and they want to put something out that's going to be pretty safe, and you know what? I don't think they really care that much. The Force Awakens was basically a New Hope 3, and Rogue One, don't get me started on Rogue One. It was awful. The most expensive fan film I've ever seen. JayEmm on Films, coming soon. Iceman7 asks, Honda S2000 versus Lotus Elise versus Porsche Cayman Boxster. What's the best as a reliable toy car for weekends and late night spirited drives? Also, is the Exige V6 too stiff for enjoying on the roads, again as a weekend car? The Elise and Exige have got a reputation of being fairly stiff, fairly uncompromising cars. Actually, they ride really well. You may remember that I reviewed an Aston Martin V8 Vantage S on the channel. Well, I drove that car back to back with my Elise, and we found, both the car's owner and myself, that the Elise rode better over poor surfaces than the Aston Martin did. And nobody really expects that to be the case, but that's how it is. And my car was actually on aftermarket suspension that was probably even stiffer than the one that Lotus fitted at factory. So the XC is just definitely not too stiff to enjoy. And that might be by your definition, but I don't think it is. I haven't tried an S2000 yet. It's one of these iconic cars that I've never even sat in. I have been offered the drive one by one of my viewers, and we are attempting to arrange that as soon as we can. So of course, when that happens, you guys will all find out. Now, I actually really love the Boxster. The 981 Boxster S and GTS is one of my all-time favourite cars. I know it's not an especially popular thing to say to a Lotus-orientated audience, but it's the truth. As an accomplished, all-round car, it's brilliant. I haven't driven one of the new 718s, but to be honest, a four-cylinder car at that price tag, it doesn't really appeal to me too much. The soundtrack's not great. You know what, the 981 was already a very good, reasonably fast car, and to me, a large part of the sports car experience is the sound, and the 718 lost that. But the 718 and the 981 and basically all the Boxsters have been very refined cars, very usable cars that are great fun at the weekend and also in the week. However, if you want something that is just going to be super special and you are, like you say, using it for weekend use only, got to be the Lotus every time. In fact, even Evo magazine in the UK, who are known for being very big fans of Porsche products, said that actually a XC Sport 350 was probably a better driving experience than the much coveted Cayman GT4. Of course, the Cayman is going to be better at nearly everything else, but if it's purity of driving experience that you want, Lotus are always going to provide that. Christian Federico says, "You look kind of gay. Are you?" Well, I wasn't. But if you ask me nicely, Christian. It's Woody98 says, "Would you ever buy a Lamborghini Huracan?" I actually looked at buying a Gallardo when I eventually got the Evora 400. Now, a Huracan is more than likely always going to be beyond my means. I'm not like the other car YouTubers. I will not be able to upgrade to some crazy new supercar every couple of months. That's just unfortunately not the case for me. I do love the look and the sound of some of the Lambos, and I love a Gallardo Superleggera, but the running costs do really concern me, and the possibility of something going wrong in a super expensive way, it's just something I didn't fancy. Plus, I'm kind of worried that after the Lotus, the driving experience might even be a little bit of a disappointment, but till I've actually driven one, I just won't know. Matthew Taylor says, "What's the worst car you have purchased and why did you purchase it?" Well, to be honest, the worst car I ever purchased was an Alfa Romeo GTV 3-litre V6. I bought it because it was cheap. At the time, I only had a very basic, simple car and I wanted a little fun car to take on track. A dealership that I knew had this car. They didn't want very much money for it. I think it was about £1,000. Now, the car had, in the past, apparently had a shunt, so it had been written off by insurance, but I was told it had been repaired. And it had a load of other things done to it, so it was fine. I just needed to put a couple of bits on it, and I had this car to enjoy. Well, I bought it, and I drove it from the place I purchased it to my friendly mechanic and MOT tester, who was about 300 yards away on the same industrial estate. And basically, everything that they told me had been a lie. The car hadn't been repaired after it had been written off. It still had loads of damage on it. The boot they'd supplied me, they said they hadn't got round to fitting. Well, they hadn't got round to fitting it because it didn't fit the car because the rest of the car was still bent. And the service history they told me it had, they told me all the engines had been rebuilt, all this stuff. Well, I went to the garages that had looked after it. That had never happened. Basically, the car was a wreck. It was going to take about 4 times the value of the car to even get to an MOT-worthy status. So basically, that car went back to them pretty damn quickly, but only after a lot of shouting, arguing, and quoting of the Consumer Rights Act. So that was a bit of a bitter experience, and I wanted to have an Alfa Romeo as well, because they say, you know, you've got to own an Alfa Romeo to call yourself a petrolhead. You should have owned an Alfa Romeo, and that really left a bitter taste in my mouth. Demus Jexter 35 says, what hot hatch will you take if you have to choose one? I'm generally not a big fan of hatchbacks, but if I was going to take a hot hatch, I actually really love the look of the Renault Sport Megane. After that, I definitely have to consider something like the Golf R. I mean, look, I know it's a really super popular car and maybe not the most exciting car as a result of that. I've never driven one. I would like to. My brother-in-law has one and I'm going to try and steal it from him for a review. But they are pretty popular cars and they're pretty decent. And ultimately, Golfs are where they are for a damn good reason, basically. I'd love to see Alfa come up with a new proper hot hatchback, but they haven't done one of those in a long time. But things are changing over there, so that'd be nice. The new Civic looks perhaps a little bit try-hard for me. I know I say that owning a bright yellow Evora, but for me a hatchback's got to be day-to-day usable, and I think the Civic may be just a little bit too shouty, and I've never got on brilliantly with Civics in the past. So yeah, something like that I think. ClamMax66 says, will the new TVR Griffith kill off the Evora? I really don't think that it will, because they are, after all, quite different cars. I think the Griffith is designed to be more of a hooligan in the traditional TVR fashion, and the Evora is designed to be a little bit of a finer handling car. I suspect that the Griffith will be a lot faster, certainly in maybe the numbers tests, but on track I really don't know. Both of them have got a lot of passionate people behind the marques, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of people converting from one to the other, but I really welcome the Griffith to the marketplace. I'm so glad to see TVR back. I just hope that the new car does well for them. So yeah, a bit of choice in the sports car marketplace, especially from small British manufacturers, can only be a good thing. And finally, Andy Vapors says, I know it's JayEmm on cars, but any more bike related stuff? I'm an old fart biker that has had to move to four-wheel since the onset of rheumatoid arthritis. I'm currently running a Z4 as it's my four-wheel motorbike. I can't squeeze into an Elise. So any cars you'd recommend for old bikers? Well, Andy, I suppose there's a few things that you could choose from. If you've got your Z4, have you tried a Z4M? Because they are loony. A little bit rough around the edges, but as a biker, maybe that's something that would appeal to you. Otherwise, perhaps consider something like the Polaris Slingshot, or maybe the Morgan three-wheeler, but if you can't get into an Elise, I suspect maybe you won't be able to get into one of those. I'd also say maybe look at some of the older TVRs, because those are definitely going to offer you some serious thrills and big smiles. Yeah, it's a difficult one, I think. You definitely want something open-topped. I think that's the only thing that's going to come close to giving you the thrill of being on a motorbike, and something with a nice big engine to give you some decent acceleration. That's what you're going to want, isn't it? And a nice bit of noise. So really, that was TVR's market. So look at perhaps an old Tuscan, or perhaps even something like an old Griffith or a Chimera. The Chimera was always the one out of the two that I preferred, although they are underneath basically identical. The Griffith seems to be the one that people want and people pay a bit of money for, but they are near enough the same car, so give that a look maybe. Thank you for all your questions, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the answers, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.